The stench of rotting seaweed filled Mira's nose as she trudged along the deserted beach. Another day, another dead body. As the island's only forensic entomologist, it fell to her to piece together the puzzle of decomposition. But this corpse was different. The insects were all wrong. Mira had moved to the remote volcanic island of Stromboli 5 years ago, drawn by its unique ecosystem and the promise of studying bug species found nowhere else on Earth. She never imagined she'd end up working homicide cases. Yet her expertise in how insects colonize dead bodies had proven invaluable to the tiny police force. This victim had washed up on the black sand, bloated and discolored. But the fly larvae crawling through the flesh were unlike anything Mira had seen before. Their life cycle didn't match the apparent time of death. Something wasn't adding up. As she collected samples, a glint of metal caught her eye. Lodged in the victim's throat was a small silver capsule. Inside, Mira found a tightly rolled piece of paper covered in strange symbols. A code, or maybe a cipher. The mystery deepened when the autopsy revealed trace amounts of a rare toxin in the victim's system. It came from a species of beetle found only in the steaming jungles of Borneo, thousands of miles from this lonely Mediterranean island. Mira's mind raced as she catalogued the anomalies. The victim was male, mid-30s, with no identification. His clothes were high-end but showed signs of prolonged exposure to the elements. Most puzzling were the strange markings on his skin, intricate patterns that looked almost like tattoos but seemed to shift and change under different light. Back in her lab, Mira pored over the evidence. The insects found on the body were like nothing in her extensive database. They appeared to be hybrids, combining traits from multiple species in ways that shouldn't be possible in nature. As she examined them under the microscope, she couldn't shake the feeling that these creatures had been engineered for a specific purpose. Days turned into weeks as Mira delved deeper into the case. She reached out to colleagues around the world, seeking insights into the strange insects and the even stranger toxin. Most of her queries led to dead ends, but a few responses hinted at a shadowy network of researchers pushing the boundaries of entomology in ethically dubious ways. One name kept coming up: Dr. Elias Blackwood, a brilliant but controversial figure in the field. He disappeared from academia years ago after his funding was cut due to concerns over his extreme experiments. Rumors swirled that he'd found private backing to continue his work, but no one knew where. As Mira dug into Blackwood's past, she uncovered a web of shell companies and offshore accounts leading to a surprising destination: Stromboli itself. A reclusive entomologist had taken up residence in the island's abandoned lighthouse shortly after Blackwood's disappearance. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. Mira's investigation led her to the crumbling lighthouse perched on the island's northern tip. The structure looked deserted, but as she approached, she noticed signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, a faint hum of electricity, and most tellingly, the buzz of insects that shouldn't be native to the island. Heart pounding, Mira picked the lock and slipped inside. The interior was a shock, a state-of-the-art laboratory hidden within the decaying walls. Specimen boxes lined the shelves, filled with insects from every corner of the globe. But it was the collection of coded notes that caught Mira's attention. They matched the cipher found with the body. As Mira unraveled the code, a disturbing picture emerged. The old entomologist, undoubtedly Blackwood, had spent decades selectively breeding insects, creating hybrid species with devastating potential. Flesh-eating flies that could strip a body in hours. Beetles whose pheromones could drive a person to madness. But why? And how did it connect to the dead man on the beach? The answer came as Mira deciphered more of Blackwood's notes. He wasn't just breeding these monstrosities for scientific curiosity. He was weaponizing them, creating the perfect swarms that could be released into the jet stream, spreading destruction across continents. The dead man had been a test subject. A human guinea pig used to fine-tune the insect's killing potential. But he'd managed to steal evidence of the plot before succumbing to the toxins. Blackwood's notes revealed a chilling timeline. The first release was scheduled for just days away. Mira knew she had to act fast. She contacted the local carabinieri, but knew they'd need more firepower to deal with this threat. As she waited for reinforcements, she continued to search the lab, looking for anything that might help neutralize Blackwood's creations. In a stroke of luck, she discovered Blackwood's research on pheromones. If she could synthesize the right compound, she might be able to control the swarms, or even drive them to destroy themselves. As Mira worked frantically to develop a countermeasure, she uncovered more of Blackwood's twisted plan. He wasn't working alone. A secret organization, calling themselves the Swarm, had been funding his research. Their goal wasn't just destruction, but reshaping the world's ecosystems to their own design. The implications were staggering. With control over insect populations, they could devastate crops, spread disease, or even influence human behavior on a massive scale. Blackwood's weaponized insects were just the beginning. Mira's discovery had put her in grave danger. As she raced to inform the authorities, she noticed she was being followed. Unmarked vans appeared on the winding island roads. Strange figures lurked in the shadows of Stromboli's narrow alleys. Using her knowledge of the island's unique terrain, Mira managed to evade her pursuers. She made contact with an old friend in Interpol, relaying what she'd learned about the swarm. But as she ended the call, she realized with horror that her lab had been compromised. Years of research, irreplaceable specimens all gone. Worse, the evidence she'd collected from the beach victim had vanished. The swarm was cleaning house, erasing any trace of their existence. With nowhere else to turn, Mira sought help from an unlikely source, a group of local fishermen known for their extensive knowledge of Stromboli's hidden caves and secret passages. For generations, they'd used this network to smuggle goods and avoid authorities. Now, it might be the key to outmaneuvering the swarm. As Mira went underground, both literally and figuratively, the island above became a battleground. The swarm had sent their own team of scientists and mercenaries, ostensibly as part of a research expedition. But Mira knew their true purpose: to secure Blackwood's work and eliminate any loose ends. From her hidden vantage points, Mira watched as the swarm tightened its grip on Stromboli. They infiltrated local government, bought off key figures, and began constructing a secret facility deep within the island's volcanic heart. Mira knew she was running out of time. The raid on the lighthouse was imminent, but she needed hard evidence to bring down the swarm. Using the fishermen's tunnels, she managed to plant surveillance devices throughout the island. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The swarm's ambitions went far beyond Blackwood's original plans. They were developing a new kind of insect, one that could survive in the harsh environment of Stromboli's volcano. These creatures would be the ultimate biological weapon, capable of withstanding extreme heat and spreading through ash clouds to blanket entire continents. The raid on the lighthouse was chaos. Blackwood had rigged the lab with failsafes, releasing clouds of his weaponized insects as soon as the authorities breached the door. Men fell screaming as flesh-eating beetles swarmed over them. Others clawed at their own skin, driven to madness by psychotropic moth scales floating in the air. Mira's knowledge of insect behavior became the key to averting disaster. Racing against time, she concocted a counteragent using pheromones that would drive the hybrid swarms into the sea before they could spread beyond the island. As sirens wailed and gunshots echoed through the night, Mira faced off against Blackwood himself. The mad scientist had barricaded himself in the lighthouse tower, threatening to release his most deadly creations, a swarm of microscopic parasites that could infect and control human hosts. In a final desperate gambit, Mira used herself as bait. She allowed a controlled exposure to one of Blackwood's earlier hybrid species, a type of wasp whose venom granted temporary immunity to the parasites. As the mind-controlling swarm filled the air, Mira remained clear-headed while Blackwood succumbed to his own creation. But even as Blackwood fell, Mira knew the greater threat remained. The swarm was still out there, with resources and influence that spanned the globe. Her actions on Stromboli had dealt them a blow, but she had no illusions about the war that was to come. In the aftermath, as hazmat teams secured the island and scientists began the monumental task of cataloguing Blackwood's work, Mira stood on the beach where it had all begun. The corpse that had washed ashore now seemed like a harbinger, a warning of how close the world had come to an unthinkable catastrophe. As she watched the sun rise over the smoldering remains of the lighthouse, a chill ran down Mira's spine. They contained the threat this time, but for how long? Blackwood's research was out there now, possibly in the hands of others with similarly twisted visions. She knew one thing for certain: she'd never look at her beloved insects the same way again. In her line of work, even the smallest creatures could conceal deadly secrets. The case was closed, but Mira's vigilance was only beginning. The island of Stromboli had revealed its darkest secret, and in doing so, had transformed a quiet entomologist into the world's foremost defender against a threat few could even imagine. As Mira walked back to her lab, her mind was already racing with plans. She had work to do. But Mira wasn't alone in her fight. The fishermen who had helped her, moved by the danger their island had faced, pledged to be her eyes and ears. Interpol, recognizing the global implications of the swarm's plot, offered resources and protection. And from across the scientific community, colleagues rallied to her cause, forming a network dedicated to tracking and stopping insect-based bioweapons. As Mira began the long process of rebuilding her lab and her life, she knew that Stromboli was just the beginning. The swarm was still out there, adapting and evolving like the insects they sought to control. But so was she. And in this new war, fought with microscopes and pheromones instead of guns and bombs, Mira intended to make sure that humanity, not the swarm, would come out on top. The gentle lap of waves on the shore mixed with the ever-present hum of insects, a sound that had once been a comfort to Mira. Now it was a reminder of the threat that lurked in the shadows and of her duty to stand against it. As the sun climbed higher, Mira took a deep breath of the salty air and turned back toward the village. She had a world to save, one bug at a time.